Cool. Hi, everyone. This is another of the regularly scheduled Tech Talks. Today we've got Paul Shannon and Miles from 7digital, sorry, to talk about how at 7digital they have an academy to onboard new engineers to the engineering discipline and a community of practice and deliberate practice around getting better at engineering. I guess an apprenticeship scheme is reasonable, but I won't give it away. So over to Paul and Miles.
All right, thanks very much. So thanks for inviting us here today. We'd like to tell people about what we're doing, get some feedback on stuff that we do, and also share ideas and that sort of stuff. So it's interesting to come over here. Also, we're going to try and convince you to hire an apprentice because we're really keen for the next generation of software developers to be trained by people that know what they're doing. And we've heard you guys know what you're up to, so it's always useful. So I'm Paul Shannon. I'm our VP of Technology currently at 7digital. I used to be a developer in one of our dev teams, and I originally founded the 7digital Technical Academy in 2012, which we'll go into later. Got with me my colleague Miles. So Miles is also a developer in our team. He was also a former apprentice, and this year has been the coordinator for the Technical Academy. So lots of experience in this sort of stuff. So I'll tell you a little bit about 7digital, a little bit about the academy, how we first, the problem we were trying to solve, how we initially came up with the idea, what we tried to do first iteration, and then Miles will talk about the time and his experience in the academy, and then what he's been doing over the last year, and then we'll sum up with some cold hard facts to prove that it works and convince you that it's a good idea to do. So let's have a little look at the problem. So in 2012, at 7digital, we had about 25 people in the tech team, and we were looking to expand. And at that time, we did a lot of, well, we still do a lot of test-driven development, a lot of lean and agile stuff. And to find a senior developer with that level of skill and that type of skill was really difficult. So a lot of people would apply with TDD and things on their CV, but when they came in, actually, they didn't know what they were doing, and they just put it on there because it was a nice little buzzword. So we needed to find the people that actually knew what they were doing and could join our team and join the rest of the devs in our team. But we found it really difficult, and we started to look for other alternatives. So rather than looking at the top end of the scale at the senior developers, we started looking at more graduate level and inexperienced people. And we found that the amount of training involved with someone with no experience was about 2 years of dedicating one of the senior devs to mentoring them and that sort of stuff. So we tried a kind of very sort of craftsmanship, old style apprenticeship program where we would have an apprentice set with a master, if you like. But we found that was quite disruptive to the team, and it'd mean we'd have to sacrifice a whole senior developer out of a team for some time. So after we've been looking at the sort of opportunities to get more junior people in, we thought, well, maybe there's some sort of other approach to it. So we noticed there was a big experience gap between senior developers and junior level developers. So we did a basic search back then on one of the popular job boards and found that we've got only around 6,000 jobs with people looking for people with less than 2 years experience. But then if you look for people with more than 2 years experience, then you've got more than 40,000 jobs available. So at some point, there's going to be a lack of influx from these people that can't get jobs in the first place. Where do people get this 2 years experience from? So I've done a lot of work with universities around the country, and in universities, they always try and give people the ability to learn and give them a very generalist view of the market for when they graduate, so they can adapt themselves to any type of role. Now, one of the things that a lot of industry people, as they call us, assume is that the universities should train people exactly as we want them, so they can come out of university and work for us. So we know that's never going to be the case. So we were trying to find a way to fill in this skills gap, and in the process, expand our horizons for the sort of people who will be able to apply for jobs with us, and different markets we'll be able to look at. And kind of helps us look for different sets of people than we were just creating clones of ourselves as we were before. So kind of turn that whole thing on its head. Miles made me do that animation. And came up with our technical academy, as we call it. So it's an apprenticeship program. Developers join as full-time developers. They're not in the program, and then we offer them a job at the end, as you sometimes get in some schemes. And it's partially classroom-based, but majority of the time, the developers will be spent time working, pairing, and working on production code, deploying, and changing our actual systems. So it differs from having the apprenticeship program we used to have, where it's a one-to-one thing, in that you got different sorts of people giving these sessions, and also there were pre-prepared classroom sessions taken away from the team. So it didn't. Well, the idea was it wouldn't slow the team down as much as having someone constantly dedicated to the task. So it also meant we could get the people who were best at teaching to do the teaching, rather than people who happened to be nearby at the time that a problem was needed to be solved. And that whole team-driven aspect to it, the fact it was tutor-led, really empowered the team to get behind it and get involved and that sort of stuff. So that was our idea. One of the things we noticed quite early on is that we were able to attract people from different backgrounds. So in our first set of applicants, we had a musician who'd never done software development before, not got a real science background, but with 7digital being a digital music company, that really helped. And that really sounded interesting to us. We could get these people with slightly different backgrounds. Since then, we found that we've got a forensic biologist. Miles here has a background in physics. We've got a music psychologist who's come through our academy and things. So we're really getting a broad spectrum of people's different experiences. And also we're finding that we're able to approach the perennial problem in the IT industry in the gender gap, that we're now attracting more women into applying for this sort of role, to the extent that our team now is more diverse in terms of gender as well. So that was a nice little side effect, that once we kind of discovered that in the early days, thought, well, this is a good reason to continue doing this and focus on this sort of thing. So it kind of underpinned one of the reasons that we wanted to continue. So let's have a little look at the timeline that we want to talk about today. So we've run 3 iterations of the Technical Academy. The first was in 2012, and ran for 6 months then. And then it was quite a while until we moved on to the second iteration, because we don't just run this for philanthropic reasons, for the fact we want to train the next set of developers. I'd quite like to do that, but we still have the business to run, so it goes in line with how we're expanding our team. So when we're expanding the team in late 2014, that's when we set this second iteration going. And then only a few months after finishing the first one, we set the third iteration going. One of our senior developers left, and he was actually the person that was the coordinator in the second time, and said, why don't you replace my role with 2 apprentices instead? And we thought, yeah, that's a good idea. So that's exactly what we did. So in the beginning of the academy, so we'd had these ideas. We kind of had to think about what we wanted to do with it. So we formed a academy committee. We had meetings around what we wanted to plan and that sort of thing, and came up with a big list of what we thought we needed to teach people, because we knew what we were doing and they didn't. So we came up with a great list and a curriculum and a journey on how to become a 7digital developer. So it seemed like a great idea at the time. So that's how we kind of started off. And next thing was to try and find some people, which didn't prove as difficult as we expected. There were, we went to Silicon Mill Roundabout. We had people who already applied speculatively from universities and things, and we'd also had great links with universities where we give lectures and talks as well. So finding the people to start the academy wasn't too difficult. In the first iteration, we took on 3 apprentices. There were 2 external hires, so one person we found Silicon Mill Roundabout, the other one applied directly, and then one person we actually transferred internally. So this was another thing that we discovered early on, that actually quite a unique thing we could offer with the Tech Academy, that people from our content ops team, so content ops at 7digital, take all the music from all the labels like Universal, Sony and Warner, and they use our systems to ingest it, as we call it, take the metadata and the audio file, transcode it, put it on the servers, all that sort of stuff, and then manage the relationship. So it's not a technology-driven job, but it's very technology-focused, and they're using a lot of technology. One of the guys in that team had started scripting using a bit of PHP. He'd also been doing some really fancy spreadsheets to try and manage their workflows and that sort of thing. And then, because he'd kind of built this idea of solving problems using software, he came to me and said, can I join in with the academy? So That's what we did. So that was nice to give someone an opportunity to come and join the team. What we gained was a developer who'd already had the domain knowledge of the company, already had the relationships built up with the people in the company, so it's a lot different to someone starting from scratch. So have a little look at the journey that we set up to start with in the academy. So it's as I said, 6-month program. Before, well, just after we'd hired them, before they come and join the team, we have a sort of meet at the team event, take them down the pub, take them out for lunch, bring them in, show them around, make sure they get to know everyone, so that on their first day it's not too daunting. They know where they're coming to. And on day 0, we put them in the first 6 weeks, which we call the boot camp. So that's a little more intensive than later on in the academy, where we have shorter but more frequent sessions concentrating on things like programming basics, test-driven development, using Git, how Kanban works on a day-to-day basis, and all that sort of stuff. Then after the first 6 weeks, we move them into the in-depth sessions. Now these were between an hour and 2 hours, usually a bit of theory followed by practical, so they're all linked in, and it enabled them to get more in-depth into the topic. So we're looking at things like solid principles and how Kanban flow actually works, and theory of constraints and systems thinking and all that sort of stuff, which all adds to the way that they work. And now that they got the mechanics right from the first 6 weeks. Following that, in week 18, they went into what we call the specialization stage. So at that point, they're kind of deciding what they want to do with their careers inside 7digital, and we don't all program in the same languages, we don't all build the same type of systems, so by that point we need to make sure that we can help them specialize in the areas they look at. So for instance, Dan, one of our first apprentices, moved from the API team into the search team, so we started talking to him about Lucene and Solar and things we're using there. And then Chris, who moved from our ingestion team into our web team, started looking at more JavaScript and Node.js and all that sort of stuff. So around that time, we were able to help them specialize. As we invite anyone from the organization to come along to the sessions, whether that's from the tech team or elsewhere, for most of the engineers in the tech team, it's people sort of honing their skills and kind of polishing their tools and that sort of stuff. The specialization stuff was quite a draw, as people were able to learn a bit more from other teams and see what's going on elsewhere. And then right at the end, after 6 weeks, we have the graduation ceremony, where we get them all a nice mortarboard, buy them all a book, have some champagne, I'll have a bit of a fuss about it, and make sure we really appreciate the effort they put in to try and become one of us. And then after that, that's when it really starts working, actually, before I skip back. So one of the other things on this diagram is notice there's a retrospective at every time every juncture. And that was really key to us, that we're constantly inspecting and adapting what we were doing, so we could always improve as we were going through the academy. This was new to us in the first time, so we always wanted to make sure that we were steering in the right direction. One of the key things that came out of one of the early retrospectives was that we were sometimes asking the apprentices to do things that we'd not yet taught them in depth how to do. So we then started looking at things like pool-based learning. So as an example of this, in the team that I used to develop in, one of the sort of mid-level developers was working with one of the apprentices and trying to explain to him dependency injection. Now, in the legacy code base they were working on, that was quite hard to exemplify using the code, and he was trying his hardest. I don't think he really understood it himself, so it was difficult for him to actually teach the concept. So rather than having waste the rest of the day trying to explain this and get on with the task they were trying to do, we asked the apprentice what he'd like to learn about it. We set up a session later the next day, got someone who really knew dependency injection, really knew what inversion control was about and how the tools worked, for them to prepare a session and run that session. The following week, the two guys paired back up again, and they just motored on with the tasks because they both understood it. So by taking the apprentice out into the classroom session, giving them a chance to learn the theory behind dependency injection and look at, try it in a more isolated environment in a small kata where you can really see the difference it makes.
Does that imply you've got some sort of pre-canned lessons that you've got ready to go?
Yeah,
or do you make them on the fly?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we had a lot of pre-canned lessons where we scheduled it and we thought that'd be easy, we'd plan it out, we'd just clone people, basically, turn them into what we knew. But what we quickly discovered after the first retrospective is that what we planned to teach wasn't what they needed to know to do their jobs. And also, it wasn't necessarily what they were interested in the teams they were working. So we went to this pool-based stuff. Now, the difficulty with pool-based learning is that the apprentices don't know what they don't know yet. So that was the tough part for us to try and figure that out. So we still had a balance between planned sessions and things being driven by the need to do this sort of stuff. One of the when we started looking at this, we had a conversation with a guy called Professor Dave West, who works at Minnesota University on a software development degree course. And they use this for the whole of their course. So they'll get the whole cohort in on day one, give them a task to build a business, like a startup, if you like, and then ask them to request from the lecturers what they need to know in order to be able to get this business up and running. And they'd actually had great success in teaching people that way, but also it built a very lean business that worked with a set of people they needed with the right skills without giving them information they didn't really need. So some of the sort of businesses and tasks they built out that actually went into a more commercial frame. So that's quite interesting. So because we saw that working, and we like that feedback loop, and we like the involvement and the collaboration between the apprentices and what they want to learn, we continued that into the second iteration, which is what Miles is going to talk to us about.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to tell you a bit about how I discovered the 7digital Tech Academy, then go on to talk about my experience in the second iteration, and then go into detail about how that's influenced my decisions in coordinating the third iteration, which we'll come on to later. So first of all, as Paul said, my background's in physics. I did a degree in physics at university. I never really got on with IT at school, despite it offering a range of word processing and spreadsheets. I never really thought computing was my kind of thing. In my second year of university, I had my first go at programming in a physics context. And then that summer, I managed, with the knowledge I gained over that year, I managed to get a placement at a physics research center programming applications, and I absolutely loved it. And from that moment on, I took every opportunity throughout my physics course to further my programming knowledge, and but it was still in the context of physics, so it wasn't, I suppose it wasn't hugely similar to the stuff that I learnt in the Tech Academy. So towards the end of my degree, I was looking for a job. I was spending days and days in a row on my laptop, scrolling through stacks of graduate schemes and placements and this and that, and I managed to Google the right combination of tech and graduate and placement and something or other and all these sort of words, and I managed to find myself on the 7digital careers site. It wasn't the current 7digital careers site, it was a cached careers site from about a year prior, where they were advertising for an apprenticeship, for an apprentice in an apprenticeship called 7digital Tech Academy. So I had a little read through what they promised I'd learn in the Tech Academy, and there were things that I like to think I knew a bit about, like JavaScript and SQL. There were things that I'd heard of, but I thought they were the domain of computer scientists, things like Agile, things like automated testing. And then there was stuff that I'd never heard of, but they sounded pretty cool. So DevOps and design patterns and a load of three-letter acronyms that are clearly very important. So I sent 7digital a quick email to say, is this Tech Academy a thing? I tried to make it sound like this was what I really wanted to do. I got quite good at that over the past few weeks. I wasn't just sending my email to everyone that I could get my, sending my CV to everyone I could get my hands on. And I didn't know if this placement existed, so they offered me, they asked if I'd like to come in, have a look around the office and see what's going on. And I enjoyed my afternoon at 7digital. And at this point, I still had no idea whether the Tech Academy was a real thing anymore. Turns out the idea was floating around to restart the Tech Academy for another iteration if they found a set of apprentices with the right combination of enthusiasm for learning and programming blank slateness that they could train up to become a 7digital developer. So following that afternoon at 7digital, I was asked back for a proper interview with suits and questions and pens and that sort of thing. And after a nice chat with Paul and some other senior developers at 7digital, I was asked to complete a little programming exercise using techniques that I'd only just been talked to about in a language that I'd never used before. And I thought it went awfully. But I was surprised to hear that I got through because they weren't looking at what I already knew. They were paying attention to how I picked up new concepts and how I reacted to things I was unfamiliar with. So a few weeks after that interview, I started at the Tech Academy. There was 4 of us. There was me. Well, this is a good bit about diversity. There was me, the stereotypical white male, and then there was another external hire, Sophie, a transfer from client ops, Mia, and a cross-skilling QA, Kate, none of whom are stereotypical white males. On my first day, I was given a laptop and a copy of clean code to get me started. After 17 years of continuous education, I thought that this apprenticeship would be a strictly scheduled, there'd be a curriculum and regular assessments and all this sort of stuff. But I was surprised to find that it wasn't as formalized and established as I'd expected. It was quite fluid and it adapted to any problems we were facing in our day-to-day work, and so that's kind of like the pull stuff, pull-based learning that Paul was talking about. Despite that, the projects were, in previous years, I've been told that projects were just sort of like a little extra thing that the apprentices undertook to put what they're learning into action, just to have a play around. But now the projects were a key element of the Tech Academy. Each project had a product owner, who would be someone the apprentice would go to talk to for requirements and that sort of thing. Kanban, we had regular stand-ups around a Kanban board, we had regular demos, we did test-driven development, this and that, and the projects themselves, any problems we faced in that then tied back into the classroom-based sessions through the whole pool-based system. It was also emphasized that outside of the scheduled and planned sessions for us, we were free to work and study and things in the way we felt would most benefit us. And between the 4 of us, we quickly built up a strong community where we would we'd regularly plan sessions, sharing sessions amongst ourselves, where we'd share things we'd learned that week. And we set up a regular reading group where we'd read a blog or a chapter of a book, and we'd discuss it amongst ourselves outside of the organised thing. Yeah, like that. We were also encouraged to work, of course, in our teams. We're placed in teams. We were encouraged to work in our teams when we could. And as I became more comfortable with the technology we were using, became more confident as a developer, I gradually shifted from working mostly on my project and Tech Academy stuff, which would be this line here, towards working more on production work in my team. I've made this graph up, but it's kind of like that. And then you can see there's a sort of dip down at the end here, as the project deadlines approached and graduation came near, and then that's the end of the academy. So this takes us on to, wrong way, the 3rd iteration. So about a year after I started, the idea was floated around again to reboot the Tech Academy, take on a new set of apprentices, and the developers in the tech team were very enthusiastic about training another set of apprentices. But we needed, as Paul said, the coordinator from the previous year had left, and so we needed someone with a good understanding of the Tech Academy to facilitate it this time around. I thought about putting my name forward, but I wasn't entirely convinced, because I thought, being new to software development, I wouldn't I'd kind of lack the experience necessary to teach them to the full potential. I wouldn't give them the best experience through the Tech Academy, but it turns out, after talking to Paul and talking to people who had been heavily involved in the Academy before, that I didn't need to. I was only a facilitator, and I just needed to know who would be a good teacher. And I'd also get first dibs on running the sessions that I was confident with. So I put my name forward. And right, missed a bit. On top of that, I thought having experienced the Tech Academy from the other end, I would know which parts of the previous iteration worked and which things maybe could be changed or improved. Yeah, so I put my name forward, and personally, on a personal level, I also hoped that this would improve my leadership skills, both in taking the set of apprentices through the 6-month scheme and also in coordinating a group of tutors and all the people involved in getting the academy running. So we took on 6 apprentices last year. We had 2 external hires, 1 transfer from the data team. We had a cross-skilling QA, a cross-skilling content ops manager, and a cross-skilling designer. So cross-skilling, we mean someone that stays in they're staying in their current role. They're not moving, they're not becoming a developer, but they're going through the Tech Academy to gain technical skills to enhance them in their current role. So it's kind of like an extra thing we do. They're part of the academy, but it's like an extra benefit on top of these new developers we get.
A question for you.
Yes.
Do you do that for, let's say that there's a server-side developer who happens to use .NET. Do you do cross-skilling for if they want to get more into native apps development, so gaining specialization within their current discipline?
A lot of the, we try to make the sessions as open as possible. So if we think someone would gain from only a particular area of things that we'd cover in the whole Tech Academy, we'd ask them if they'd like to be involved in, come along for the parts that would be of interest to them. But if there's someone that would benefit from the whole shebang, then they come all the way through.
Yeah, so the cross-skilling is more for people who can use techniques and things, well, things like programming and scripting to enhance their role. So like in design, it was useful for them to understand how web pages were put together when they were, designing web pages, and then in QA, so they could get involved in the code a little bit more, as well as just testing and writing acceptance criteria and so on.
So with these 6 apprentices, brings me on to the next point, is getting it to work at a larger scale. So in the past we've had 3 and we've had 4 apprentices. 6 apprentices brings with it a whole set of new challenges. First of all, having people with cross-skilling people, they already have commitments within the company, and so it would be more difficult to, as in the past, we scheduled the sessions as and when we needed them. In this last iteration, we had to lay down a more structured timetable, I suppose, so that other parts of the business would know or be able to anticipate when there might be disruption from these people joining in academy sessions. The session slots were timetabled, but the content of the session was still very flexible and pool-based, and we wouldn't decide on the content until just before we needed to, that side of things. Another challenge was having a set of people with different current experience levels, different objectives for the Tech Academy, and also different amounts of time they could commit to the Tech Academy. There was a challenge in setting the pace of the learning, and this was where peer-to-peer knowledge sharing became more important, so they'd work together to share their experience without the need for a tutor or a planned session to teach these people peer-to-peer stuff. So one of the surprising side effects of having a larger academy cohort is that the community amongst the apprentices that I spoke about earlier was slower to develop. And so, for example, with the reading group, which I found very beneficial, which we organised amongst ourselves, I tried to encourage the guys to do something similar, and I helped them out to start with, but they never really got the autonomy of sort of taking it over and getting it running, but that may have been to do with the whole structured timetabled ness of it. Also, having more apprentices working on more projects was beneficial in it promoted the pull for learning, because everyone was working with different technologies. There was more pull for different topics throughout the course of the academy. I'll tell you a bit about some of the key changes that I saw happen between the second iteration and third iteration. So previously, the Tech Academy product owners were just members of the tech team playing the role of a product owner, helping out the apprentices, but this inevitably meant that they got into the more technical details of how the projects should work. This year, we had members of the product team involved, and we basically got more of the business involved in the project work in the academy. Also, we were blocked with our projects finding somewhere to deploy the production application to. We needed a server, but as our business is moving towards the cloud, we suggested that the apprentices deploy to AWS. The problem with that was that we're still, well, the senior developers are still getting to grips with AWS, so it just moved the bottleneck from computer resources to teaching resources, and it was still a bit of a sticking point, but I think that will be something we'll discuss before projects in a future iteration. When I was in the Tech Academy, we had a couple of retros, but I found them very beneficial to the whole learning process. We came away with actions that sort of improved things noticeably. And so I tried to make sure they're more frequent in this latest iteration, on top of weekly catch-ups we had with all the apprentices to make sure they were keeping up with things.
Can you give us some examples of actions that you took to improve?
Yeah, so let's have a think. So with the reading group, for example, we'd normally have a weekly catch-up on a Monday, and then discuss something that they'd been reading the previous week, also on a Monday. The problem with that was that it separated the pool from the previous catch-up from the reading group session, because it was like a whole week apart. So what we did, rather than having the reading group after the next catch-up, we moved it to the Friday, so they still had time to read the material, but it was still part of it felt more connected, I suppose. They felt like there was a disconnect between the request for knowledge and then the session itself. I'll have a think about whether I can think of anything else. This last point looks a bit controversial, so I'm going to expand on that at first. No test-driven development at first. So we came in first week, started getting our hands on code, and from the start we were told to use this thing called test-driven development to drive functionality in our apps. People often said that taking this approach, we would never fully appreciate the advantages of test-driven development because we wouldn't feel the pain of doing the alternative, because we're new software developers. We wouldn't fully appreciate what test-driven development, the safety net that test-driven development gives us. So what we did this year was, for the first few weeks, we kept this test-driven development thing under apps. Didn't talk about it. We asked them to build apps. They did that. And then we asked them to add features. They tried to do that, but they broke things. And there's a lot of manual testing. So we uncovered this holy grail, TDD, and they seemed pretty sold on it. So I think that's about the majority of it. Yeah, there we go. So this is the 4 years of the Tech Academy in the last 18 months of my life. I'll give you back to Paul to see if it's paid off.
Yeah, so question that we got asked before we even started this, and by a lot of people in organisations, is, did it work? How are we going to measure it? So when we first came up with the idea, the company founder at the time said, how are you going to measure it? How are you going to prove that it's going to work? And I said, well, I'm not sure we can. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to do this, but what we'll look at is the stuff that we usually measure, the stuff we usually care about, and see if that changes in a positive way. So first thing that I like to talk about, and we've mentioned quite a bit throughout this talk, is that we now have a more diverse team. So we have people from different backgrounds, we've got people, different genders, racial diversity, and this all comes from the fact that we are able to attract a greater audience and also go to different areas to try and get people to come and join us. And we haven't been narrowed by the fact that people have got a particular degree or a particular set of experience, or subscribe to the same sort of practices that we do, because we can help teach them that sort of stuff. A good example of this is that recently we were building a music streaming app for a Brazilian customer, and everyone was obsessed with going offline first, so that you could always play your music offline, just like you can in Spotify, so when you're on the tube or you're out of signal area. Now that's not important in Brazil, because people don't listen to music on the move or wear headphones out in public because of the high crime rates, and people just won't do that on the streets. Because we've got someone who'd spent a lot of time in Brazil and understood this, they could stop us quite early in our tracks and say, look, you need to rethink why, how you're approaching this problem. And that's just one of the examples of how we get a sort of more diverse mindset to help us as we're trying to solve problems. So there's an interesting graph. So something useful I found in Jira. And this is the 6-month period that Miles was in the content development team. So the little dots there are the tasks that were completed over that period, and their cycle time in elapsed days on the left. So the blue line, you can see, goes up within the first 3 months as Miles joins. So the team spending time coaching him and training him did slow them down. But then after sort of 4 months, you can see the cycle time starting to go back down again as Miles gets to a certain level that he can help, as he's now, I think he was the 5th or 6th developer in that team at the time. And then I can tell you as well that it kind of trends downwards and continues that way well after the 6 months. So although not an awful lot of data, this is the sort of thing that people ask me questions about how you're going to measure this works. This is what I can tell them. It's also the sort of thing that if you want to try and present this to your employer, you can say, well, 7digital got a graph to prove it, which is quite nice. The team also felt that productivity improved. Whether they did or it didn't, from their point of view, I think the fact that they got this motivation from doing it, really helped the atmosphere in the team.
How well established was the team before taking Miles on as a unit?
So they've been as a team for probably about 4 or 5 months. So yeah, they got into the code base and studied quite well, and the people in the team have been there quite a while. So as that particular unit, they've been reasonably well established. I wouldn't say they were the most performant team or the most motoring through things. So it was nice to see once Miles had kind of been through the academy that they're able to all together improve this sort of stuff. It's interesting now that you look back at Miles only been with the company for 18 months. Yet no one seems to remember that he was a physicist 18 months ago and couldn't actually program, and certainly couldn't write production code that serves more than 1 billion requests around the world every month, as the rest of us do. So from that point of view, it seems like it's really vindicated itself. And the last point that I'd like to talk about to demonstrate this works is that we now have an improved culture of learning and sharing. Like the fact that we're even here talking about this now shows that we like to share things. The learning aspect within the team is improved. So when you've got people writing sessions about particular topics, they've got to look at that more in depth. When they're giving those sessions, we'll get people from other teams and from other areas sharpening their tools and listening to new topics. And then because people are engaging with developers from other teams on stuff that they don't normally write on, it's really helped people share knowledge and share experiences. To the extent that recently we've moved from 7 siloed teams to just 2 teams of cross-functional engineers working on one backlog. So that whole atmosphere and the culture of being able to share and work together with different teams has really made the opportunity a lot easier and an easier transition for us. So in conclusion then, I do like this quote from Socrates. Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. So after the 6 months, that's not it for Miles, that's not it for the apprentices, that's just the start of their learning. So what we teach in the academy, as well as the skills to do their job, it's also the fact that they need to continuously improve, continuously inspect what they're doing, and continuously and deliberately practice their skills to get better. And that's one of the key things that we look for when we hire people at any level, that they fit that mindset and that enthusiasm for learning. So that's it from us. Thanks very much for allowing us to come. This is the first time Miles has given this talk in public. First time he's done a tech talk in public, I think. It's also our pre-Edinburgh show, as we're sending this talk up to XP 2016 in Edinburgh later this year. So we're doing a little tour of this. So thanks for letting us come and practice. So yeah, I'll let you chuck around the catch box and ask us any questions.
All right, so this question is for Miles. What skills do you find transferable from your previous life?
That's a good question. I suppose sort of scientific discipline.
Yeah, the scientific method.
Scientific method.
So Miles will often propose a hypothesis that we then have to solve. As before, we'd just be trying to solve problems by iterating, and sometimes that approach has really helped us.
And I remember a time when I was very, very new at 7digital. Just we were talking about encoding one file format into another file format, and I asked whether you could do that because one number wasn't divisible by the other one, and they were like, "Oh, hang on a second. No, we'll lose audio quality. Let's not do that." So I suppose basic maths as well.
Yeah, I think the appreciation of physics is something you've brought to the team. Not that many physicists in the team, are there?
Yeah, no.
Cool, thank you.
Hi. So the size of the apprenticeship seems to be quite small. So you've got 4 students and then 6. Was that sort of big enough to have like an overall sort of positive effect on the whole company, or like would you plan to expand on that in order to get more out of it?
So this is one of the reasons we encourage the cross-skilling time. That if we were spending time, investing time in preparing and delivering a particular topic, that we wanted everyone to get the most out of it. So the fact that other people were coming into the sessions kind of justified that investment as well. We found, and as Miles pointed out, in the 3rd iteration, having more people actually caused a few problems when we tried to scale it out. And the other reason that we didn't scale it anymore is that we were restricted by the growth of the team, the budget that we were looking for. You know, we now at 56 people in our team. When we started this, we were around 20, and it was all part of our growth plan. So we only run this when we actually want to grow the team anyway. So yeah, I mean, we often considered, like joining up with another company to do it, so that we could, make sure we share that investment in the teaching and the learning and so on, or taking on more apprentices. But actually, the community aspect in the 2nd iteration, I think, was probably demonstrated we got the right number of people. I think when we had 3 people in the first one, they didn't have that community type. But yeah, as soon as they had a few more people in, when Miles joined, it certainly was a lot more self-led, and that aspect to it, since we try and foster self-organizing teams and things like that, the fact that we could just set them off and they would go off and learn with our help was a really positive effect on us. But no, it didn't have a massive impact on the team or the company. It's just a nice impact that helped us grow the team in a way that was different to how we've been doing it before.
And did you find that it was the same sort of group of developers who were directly involved consistently sort of being that part of the experience, or did the whole company, apart from going to these sharing sessions, did the whole company sort of roll their sleeves up and sort of participate in this?
Do you mean with like
just
the teaching of the sessions?
Yeah, I guess
sort of
more sort of hands-on involvement from like existing senior members.
I think there's people that are naturally more keen to share knowledge. I think the more senior members are keen to educate the next generation, let's say. And you get to a point where like explaining difficult concepts becomes more easy once you get more, like as Paul was saying earlier, if you're only just getting to grips with concepts yourself, you're not going to explain it very clearly. So I think more senior people tended to be more active because they just felt they liked teaching people, and also they were good teachers.
Yeah, and from outside
cool.
the team, the people that were involved, to begin with, not many people involved in the first iteration. They weren't sure what we were doing and why we were doing all this sort of stuff and why it was important. But once they saw the effect of the first and certainly second iteration, in the third one, that's why we got so many people wanted to get involved with this cross-skilling stuff, because they've seen the benefits that we'll be doing and found it really interesting.
Also with the product owners, people seemed more keen to, like I'd go up to someone and ask, would you think about being a product owner for one of the Tech Academy projects? And they're like, yeah, definitely, I'd love to help out in the Tech Academy. It's really good. Which, I suppose if it was like the first time round, they'd be like, what's this Tech Academy?
What is this
I don't know. Maybe not this, maybe next year.
Cool, thanks. I guess I'm probably thinking of the TV apprentice. Do you get people sort of not necessarily working as part of a team, kind of working to, not share information, trying to get themselves to the top when they're all apprentices together?
Not really. I think, if anything, we've seen the people that are perhaps a little bit further on because they picked up a concept earlier, bringing the other people with them, bringing them up to speed, so that they all try and finish at the same level. Yeah, I mean, because we hire them at the beginning as a full-time developer, there's no incentive to be better than anyone else. So there's no competition for a job at the end. They all get paid the same, and there's no difference when they graduate in that they just they get to choose a different team if they want to, but they just carry on being a developer. So there's no competitive aspect to it. So that's not really been a problem for us, thankfully.
So you said that one of the problems that you had was recruiting developers, and they didn't have some of the skills that you wanted them to have, despite claiming that they did. I guess that's probably a problem with developers that you already have. Do you get, I guess, existing skilled developers to also run through a version of this at some stage?
Yeah, so we've, in between the first and second iteration, we did run a few more sort of senior level, if you like, classes from the more senior people. Tried to get external people in to talk as well. And we're currently running what we call a software craftsmanship program, where we're getting a well-known agile coach to come in, and he takes our team through topics very similar to this sort of stuff. I mean, two of the topics have been the same topics that we've been taught in the academy, but obviously at a different level and a very more objective point of view. And that works by having sessions once every 2 weeks. They spend the whole morning of a Wednesday doing the session. The afternoon, they'll then go back and pair with their teams, and the coach will join one of the teams. And then they get homework for the rest until the next session, where they have to practice what they've learned in that session with the rest of the team, so that we're getting that spread of knowledge throughout the team. So I think that comes from my point about, did it work? Yes, we've got a learning culture now that people have been asking for more of this sort of stuff, and basically observed the same thing that you have, that we've given this sort of teaching and learning aspect to the newcomers, but actually to people that already exist that also need to be able to come up. So that's been probably a positive effect of it, I think.
And then I guess, well, this all sounds like a load of work. How do you prioritize this amongst the roadmap items of engineering work and feature delivery work, and the sort of day-to-day actual job?
Yeah. So
how do you slot it in, and how do you champion it?
Yeah, so we have a mixture of, well, one of the main thing we do is make it as visible as we can. So if someone's working on something for a particular session, they'll get it on their Kanban board and put a card against it and that sort of stuff. In terms of weighing that against the priority, that's been one of the things that Miles, and when I was a coordinator, had to balance quite well. and left it down to us, to the extent that I think Miles has probably spent a lot more time than anybody else, away from doing roadmap work to do this sort of stuff, and certainly I did when I was doing it as well. So we all agreed, and before we ran it, it wasn't just a case of the dev team going, hey, let's just get some developers and do this. We spoke to the operations teams and the product teams and ensured that they understood that the investment for 6 months in this meant that we get effectively 2 developers who are well skilled in 6 months' time versus perhaps spend another 6 months searching for a senior developer. Because the thing I didn't mention is that we found the time to recruit a senior developer was a lot longer than an apprentice. They came almost straight away once we decided. So, so that balance, it's a case of talking to the product team about that sort of thing. But we kept it visible, so it weren't as if we were doing it on the sly and everyone knew what was going on. But yeah, the balance was difficult in that the roadmap items would have slowed down during the time, as you can see by the cycle time and things as well on the graph that I had.
We've got a question from the Hangout from Chris Sewell downstairs. When are you starting up again, and how can people apply?
So, as I said, it aligns with our growth strategy in the team, and we don't want to run them back to back, so that we can have a bit of a, to the thing we just talked about, so that we can have a bit of a recovery period from it as well. So we probably run one at some point next year. But we couldn't say when. It's a case of just keeping an eye on our website and our Twitter feeds, and also getting in touch with any of us if anyone's interested. Or in fact, like Miles did, apply speculatively, and we'll keep your CV on file and get in touch when it's ready. So yeah, you can send CVs directly to me on our address.
And now a question for me. What has this had any measurable effect on your retention rates for employees?
Probably, I don't think the stats would say that. We've not seen retention. The retention has been the same, or like we lose the same number of people every year as we always have. That's neither gone up nor down over the last 2 or 3 years. I think there are definitely some people in the team who have found this extra aspect of their job has made their job less mundane, or a new reinvigoration for their role, so perhaps not decide to look elsewhere and that sort of stuff. But I don't have any hard figures on to prove either one way or the other.
The apprentices themselves seem to hang around.
Yes, they do. Well, you're still here.
I'm still here.
Despite
and all the apprentices from the first iteration.
That's it, yeah. So we've not actually... The only apprentice we have lost was Kate, who moved on. She was one of the cross-skilling QAs. But the people we hired in as apprentices are all still here and doing things like leading the academy, and Mia was one of our apprentices. She's leading our knowledge sharing sessions, hence we're here again thanks to her. So they kind of take on more responsibility earlier as well, which I quite like.
Any other questions? Anything from the Hangouts, Sammy? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in, and that's a wrap.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.